Hello and welcome to a new video for Star Wars: The Old Republic. In this video, I'm going to be looking at what exactly are combat styles, how can we get combat styles, what are the different restrictions and ways that we look at them, and of course, being able to change your dark and light or add a second combat style. So this video will go through all of those in a bit more detail than what I've discussed before, but also in a more cohesive and complete way so that you can see everything you need to know about combat styles that are upcoming changes to Legacy of the Sith in 7.0 for Star Wars: The Old Republic. So this is how the current character selection screen looks, and if we pause this right here, you can see along the side here that there are the original 8 class stories that are available for that faction, and you can see that there's actually 2 choices available to you. So this is what they currently call combat proficiencies. So you get to pick an advanced class. So there's 2 advanced classes that are attached to a single story as it stands right now. So if you're going to pick the Jedi Consular, you will be able to pick from a Sage or a Shadow. So these are your combat styles now. They just rename them. So basically you've got your Sentinel, your Guardian, your Sage, and your Shadow are the 4 Force users on the Republic side. And then on the Imperial side, you would have your Marauder, your Juggernaut, your Sorcerer, and your Assassin. And of course, tech users will also have 8 in total as well between Republic and Imperial side. So yes, this is what they're now calling combat style. You still have the 3 options attached to each one. So now let's hop over and take a look at what it looked like on the PTS, as this is more or less the new system that we're going to be getting for character creation. So they've changed the UI a lot, and there's a different way of actually building your first character. So if you look along the top here, you can see that there is Choose Your Origin Story. So these are the 4 class stories that we're used to seeing. So Jedi Knight, Jedi Consular, Smuggler, and Trooper. You'll notice a big difference though with Choose Your Style. I currently have 8 options available for me to choose from. So these are the combat styles we were just talking about. As you create a new character, you get to choose for a Force user any of the 8 Force user combat styles, or as a tech user, any of the 8 tech user combat styles. Now let's pause for a second here, and we're going to talk about a little bit of an exception that they've made for how you're picking your combat styles as a Force user. So to talk about this change, you're going to need to go and look at your legacy to see what you have unlocked. So if you look at the legacy window that I've just brought up here, under other, you can see under alignment, I had dark and light 5 unlocked. So these are going to be requirements to be able to pick all 8 combat styles for a Force user instead of being limited to the 4 that are specific to your faction. So now let's go back to the character creation screen and explain how that works. So if I want to create a Republic character who's a Force user, and I do not have Dark 5 unlocked, I will only have access to the 4 Republic classes, or combat styles I should say, for that person to pick from when creating a character. They will not be able to pick the dark side. So I have Dark 5 unlocked, so therefore I have all 8 available to me. If you're creating a character on the Imperial side, same idea. If you don't have Light 5 Legacy unlocked, you would only have 4 instead of 8 to choose from. And also when we get into talking about the second combat style, just remember that this restriction will still apply. So go ahead, pick the class story you want to play, and then pick any of the available combat styles to play through with that character. So when you load up a new character who has combat styles on them, whether it be 1 or 2, the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go in your loadout sections, and you're going to want to create a loadout specific to the combat style you want applied. The thing to note is the current system of how the loadouts work, everything has been auto-saving. I don't know if they're going to change that on final release. You have to create a loadout for the combat style that you wish to apply to your character. So here I've created a Vanguard tank as a brand new loadout, and then I'm going to go back to my combat style screen, and I'm going to pick the Vanguard as my combat style, and then from there I can pick the discipline for tanking discipline, and all these changes are auto-saving to my loadout. So now I have a Vanguard who's able to also tank, and I can easily activate that through my loadout to swap back and forth between my different combat styles and what they're now calling disciplines as the 3 choices attached to each combat style. So now that we have a general idea of how the loadouts work in terms of wanting to kind of make those before you start making combat style changes, let's look at the actual combat styles as you'd see them for either an existing character you've already created or a brand new character you created. So you'd only have 1 available to you. And if you've met certain requirements, you're going to see this available additional combat style, and you can add a second combat style in. The important thing to know when it comes to adding a second combat style is your class stories. So when it came to actually creating a character and picking a combat style, you really didn't have to think about this. You had the combat styles available to you. The only restrictions were whether or not you had Dark or Light 5 when it comes to the Force users. Otherwise, you're just able to pick all of the combat styles you want. Now when it comes to adding a second combat style on a character, this is another restriction you have to be aware of. So if you've created an Imperial Agent character you have to go in your legacy and you have to see, have they unlocked Act 3 of their class story. So I am legendary status, I've unlocked them all, I don't have to deal with this restriction, it's always available to me. But the general idea is if it's your very first Imperial agent or none of your Imperial agents have actually ever finished Act 3, you will not be able to add a second combat style to any of the Imperial agents that you have. As soon as one of your Imperial agents unlocks the Chapter 3, Act 3 of the class story in the Legacy panel here, then all of your Imperial agents will have the option to go in and add a second combat style. So it's pretty simple, they give you a little bit of a quest, you say, yep, I want to go add a second combat style, and then you're going to get dropped into a nice little cutscene where you get to see all the different choices that are available to you. And the game will give you this list over here that lets you choose which combat style that you want to assign as your second combat style. So one of the interesting things about doing this cutscene is you get to see a little bit of an animation of kind of how they say, the class plays. So it's not really a real example of how you're actually going to play in the game and how it's going to look, but it does give you a general idea, showcasing a couple of the abilities. I picked a Vanguard or a Power Tech here, and they're designed to be more of a close combat. They've got shielding so they can be a tank. So it asked me a couple of times, are you sure you wish to commit to this as your second combat style? And once you've gone through multiple confirmation dialog boxes, you now have 2 combat styles available to you as we were showing before. You can always create a character with flexibility in their combat style. And then when you're looking to add a second combat style to a character, if you're a subscriber, and you've met that requirement for Act 3 of the class story being completed, then you get to freely add a second combat style to play with. And using loadouts, you can easily create presets to make it much faster and easier to swap between these different combat styles and the disciplines that are attached to each combat style. So now I've actually got a total of 6 possible combinations of how I can play a single character without having to log out and log in a different character. The thing that's important to note about these combat styles is there is nothing that allows you to mix and match stuff between different things. So if you choose to pick a Jedi Consular story, but you choose the Sentinel skill set here, you notice I'm carrying around 2 lightsabers and I have all the abilities that a Sentinel have. So there's no actual change in terms of when you think about the original disciplines that are now being called combat styles. So you can't take the mercenary class, give them the giant assault cannon of a trooper, and expect them to have the mercenary animations for different abilities and attacks. I'm playing completely as a Jedi Sentinel, but my class story is the Jedi Consular. This is something that a lot of players were really hoping would be a little bit different. They thought that there was going to maybe be a bit more flexibility. It's unfortunate that they couldn't design a system like that, but I completely understand it's a very complex system to make. So we have this instead, which I think is still a great system. Alright, by now you should have a pretty good idea of how combat styles are basically exactly what we had in the game previously. It's just that they've renamed them and they've given you more flexibility of what origin stories they can be attached to. So previously, we only had 2 combat styles per origin story. Now we are getting all the way up to 8 combat styles per origin story. The other thing that I wanted to touch base on is when you are a Force user and you log into 7.0, your existing combat style can potentially be changed. So if you're a light-sided character and you have any points on the dark side, you would be able to go into this cutscene and change your original combat style. So generally the idea is that combat styles cannot be changed. You can't change the existing one, you can't change the first one you pick, you can't change the second one you pick. This is a little bit of an exception that they've made. So players who have existing characters that their dark or light alignment doesn't match their faction will have an option when 7.0 launches to do a cutscene and change it. So yeah, there you go. If you've been playing dark-sided on your Republic character, you can now switch it to a dark side Force user. If you've been playing a Force user on Imperial side that's very light-sided, you can now choose to switch them over to a light-sided version of themselves. So it won't allow you to pick from all the combat styles, it'll just allow you to pick the mirror to the current combat style you have. This is also going to apply to anybody who's currently going through their class story. They are going to give you an option. So yeah, those are going to be the 2 situations where this is going to apply. New characters that you've created as they go through the story will have the option to swap from light to dark, or existing characters when you log them in will also have the option to swap light or dark if their alignment is appropriate for that. Alright, so let's finish off this conversation by going back to loadouts, and we'll just tell you a little bit more about some of the restrictions, some of the things that the current loadout system was looking like on the PTS. Obviously, some of these things could change. They might change with release, or they might get patched later. But the first thing we already talked about that was quite important is loadouts are autosave. So it's very important that you create a loadout for whatever changes you want to make. When we look at the loadout screen here, we can see a few things that are saved for each loadout. You can see the current gear that's equipped, you can see way over there the actual ability tree choices that I've picked, as well as the actual specific discipline that I've picked. So these are the kind of things that get saved are what gear you're currently wearing, what ability tree choice have you made, your discipline, so on. Also, the bars themselves, where all of the abilities are, if we look a little bit down here, you can see all my bars and stuff. Those will actually be saved and they will change with your loadouts as you apply new loadouts. From what we've seen so far, loadouts have to be changed from this loadout screen, and there are quite a few heavy restrictions on how loadouts are going to be changed, where you can change them compared to what we're used to, that sadly take away from some of the things that I thought were going to be so great about loadouts. I'm really hoping some of these changes were just something on a PTS that they've decided, no, we're going to open up the flexibility. So the very first restriction is if you do not have the legacy unlock for field respecialization, you are limited where you can change loadouts, similar to when you previously would abandon your current discipline and pick a new one. So if you want to change between stuff, you have to be somewhere like your stronghold, a cantina, on fleet, somewhere that's basically a safe area. Now, if you have the field respecialization, you can pretty much do it anywhere with a few exceptions. You can't be in combat. You can't be inside of a phase, like in operations phase or a flashpoint. The other area which you cannot change is as soon as you enter the group finder queue, as long as you remain part of that group finder group, you are not allowed to change your thing. So you can queue up as something and you're stuck with that until you actually leave the queue without getting a group, or you get a group and then when you leave that group and you're no longer part of a group finder group. Still though, there are some workarounds depending on your situation. If you're in a group finder activity like a flashpoint or an operation, there's really nothing you can do because it's very hard to, get back in the group, this and that. If you're just in an operation with other players and you walk in the door, it's a little bit easier. You can exit the phase and you might have to drop group, not too sure at this point in time. Then you can change your loadout, you can get re-invited to group and hop back in the door. That's the general idea between the restrictions that they're adding to loadouts and how these play into having combat styles available in the game. I'm really excited about this feature. I'm really hoping they remove some of those restrictions to allow us more freedom and flexibility to change our loadouts within different group content, especially player versus environment content. Thank you, everybody. I hope you really enjoyed this video and I hope that you found it informative and clearer than a lot of the other stuff that's already out there, as I know there's a lot of people still getting confused by how combat styles are going to turn out in 7.0. So yeah, let's get excited and let's get ready to play some more Star Wars in a couple of weeks.